Welcome to Hochoka Podcast.
Hello, Mataki Yapi, and welcome to Hochoka, here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian Schools campus. I am Scott Wooster, today's Hochoka host. We're glad you have joined our circle to hear Dr. Damian Costello, a Catholic theologian who specializes in Indigenous spiritual traditions and serves as Director of Postgraduate Studies at NATES, an Indigenous learning community. Damian was a Hochoka Season 1 guest, and we're very excited to have him return. He's with us in a 3-part series that brings us fresh perspectives on Catholicism through an Indigenous lens. Today, we turn to the power and beauty of the Christmas tree. Welcome, Damian.
Hi, Scott.
Good to have you back.
Thank you.
So, everybody loves Christmas. Well, I can't say that. A lot of people love Christmas trees. I do, for sure. You find them everywhere, and people from all different backgrounds set them up and engage in that tradition. What got you to thinking specifically about Christmas trees?
Well, I've always loved Christmas trees, and I have this memory of one time as a family. I grew up in rural Vermont, up on a hill, forest behind us, and I'm not sure what inspired my father, because he was not very outdoorsy, but he said, let's go get our Christmas tree in the forest this year. Mm-hmm. And so the whole family went out, and it was dusk when we went. And, it was a great sunset. I can remember that. And we followed the stone wall into the pine forest and wandered around until we found a small balsam tree. And we cut it down and carried it back to our house. And by the time we were back, it was nighttime. And I can remember those stars, those beautiful winter stars, shining down. And we set it up after that. And that always stuck with me. And as I got more into Indigenous ways of knowing and learning about the Sundance tradition, I started to see that that's a little bit like a ceremony, what we did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So most people don't think of the Christmas tree having that connection with Indigenous culture. What do you mean by that connection, or how do you see that connection?
Well, you look at cultures across the world, including Northern European cultures. The tree is a sacred symbol. If you look at pre-Christian practices in Northern Europe, for example, like the Vikings, they had what was called Yggdrasil. It was the sacred world tree, and their mythology their sacred stories was that this tree held the 9 different worlds in its branches. It was the center of the universe. And in different, Viking homesteads, and even in Scandinavia today, there'll be a sacred, tree that's set up, that's growing, even in places where there aren't a lot of trees. And it's reverenced as, the center of the ancestors, a very sacred place. And you find that in Germany, the sacred thunder oak. It was always a very important part of ceremonial life in Northern European cultures. And then, of course, in the Sundance tradition in Buddhism, you have the Bo tree that the Buddha is enlightened underneath. It's a very important part of human culture.
Trees in general around the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So in the perspective of the importance of the tree around the world to these different cultures, in Northern Europe is where the Christmas tree comes from, correct? So how does that get started?
Well, there's different stories told about it, and I don't know if they're really true. But for example, there was this one saint, Saint Boniface, who came across a Germanic tribe who was about to sacrifice a child to the thunder oak, and so he stepped in, and in preventing that sacrifice, he cut down the thunder oak, which I find kind of appalling. But he took that wood and made the first altar out of it. And that part is historically documented. But the other part that's added to this is that he took out a small little balsam tree and put it in the middle of the people and said, this will be your new sacred tree. Mm-hmm. And this will remind you of the birth of Jesus. Now, one thing I think is interesting about the Christmas tree tradition is that it seems to, in some ways, have created itself. So Martin Luther, who was, one of the great Protestant reformers, who was against a lot of sort of the Catholic traditions like the Christmas tree, loved Christmas trees. and is attributed with bringing lights to it. So he was walking home one night in wintertime at Christmas time, and the stars were out, and he was just struck by the beauty of the universe. And he came home and he added candles to the Christmas tree, the first person to do that. And whether he realized this or not, he was sort of bringing this closer to that Viking, the Norse tradition, that the sacred tree holds the universe in its hands. And you see as time goes on, a sort of deepening, a return to this idea of the sacred tree and how people practice this in their homes.
Okay, and there's a lot of stories in popular culture about the Christmas tree. You know, we've heard them, we grew up with them. But what does that mean from an Indigenous perspective?
So from an Indigenous perspective, we know that plants, animals are sacred beings, right? And they act on us, right? When we smudge with sage, it's the spiritual power of sage purifying us. And so a lot of us have read Braiding Sweetgrass, which tries to bring out, the different Indigenous teachings on plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And I happened to be in a book club with her randomly during the pandemic, just 10 of us. And she mentioned that balsam, which is the most popular species for Christmas trees, in the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe name, Ngigidoag, was she who stands in prayer for us. That the scent, that beautiful Christmas tree scent, isn't just some sort of natural quality. It's not just a compound, but that's the prayer of the tree that's offering for us, that's praying for us. And so from an Indigenous perspective, bringing that into the home, that being is blessing us with its prayers. And if you think of the effect of that, if you smell that Christmas tree smell, if you grew up with that, you think back to all those beautiful Christmas memories. A lot of us can think of our family gathering around the tree, the Christmas morning, our relatives coming over. We relate to each other in a different way. I know with my own children, it's the most beautiful time of year. And I think it's that spiritual being that's with us, that's praying with us, that brings us together. It wouldn't happen without that being a part of it.
Right. And now I'm going to have to go home and tell my wife that we have to get rid of the fake tree that we just got, and we have to get a real tree in the house again. But I get what you mean, that 3 weeks where we have the tree in the house during that time is such a special time, and you relate it to your kids and family memories. I do too, and I think most of the people watching can do the same thing. So we've been talking about the secret life of Christmas trees, and you've helped me and us see some unexpected connections, I think. The Christmas tree in a Lakota context for here, for our kids and the kids that we work with here at St. Joseph's Indian School, I think that could be very relevant. And have you found anything there that could help us with our work here?
Just when I started digging into this and looking into, okay, what sort of traditions did the Lakota have with the Christmas tree? I knew Black Elk, he wrote a letter in 1908 around Christmas time that detailed, he's visiting all these churches. This is his Catholic work as a catechist. And he's going to these different communities, and he's saying, okay, we gathered, and they welcomed me with a song, and then we had a Christmas tree. And this is their Christmas service. So he would call it the Christmas tree, was the Christmas Mass. So he's dwelling on this, talking about the Christmas tree. And I stumbled on this great book, Lakota Texts, which is just recently published. And what it is, it's interviews in Lakota with elders who are telling stories in Lakota that are then translated. And so language learners can see the original story and then the translation and sort of gather some of those great pearls of wisdom that are still out there. And one person, Neva Standing Bear, who's from Rosebud initially, but married into the Standing Bear family in Pine Ridge, tells this great story about their Christmas tree traditions, that they treated it like they treated the Sundance tree. Now, Scott, you know this, right? When you go select a tree, you talk to it, you ask for permission, you pray with a pipe, you make offerings to it, and then the little children are the one to the first strike the blow with the tree, to cut it down, a ceremonial cut. And they did that with the Christmas tree. And they'd bring that back and they'd set it up, they'd decorate it like they decorate the Sundance tree. And when it was done, they'd take it to the sweat lodge and they would use it as wood for the next sweat when the Christmas season was over. That the Sundance tree and the Christmas tree blurred in practice. And the translator who worked on this, I said, do you think this is representative of how Lakota people tended to look at this, who were also participating in Christian churches? And he said, absolutely. That's why people like Black Elk saw the Christmas tree as so important, that it was the center of their Christmas celebration.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and that could be a pretty controversial notion too, couldn't it? I mean, that comparing anything to the cottonwood tree at the center of the dance could be a tricky thing among some of the people. I would imagine it's an interesting perspective. I've never heard that before. So
I should be clear that like Neva and someone like Black Elk isn't saying that this is the same. Right. This is not replacing the Sundance tree, right? But that just like the Sundance tree gives itself so that we can pray with it, so that the people may live. Mm-hmm. This sacred being that we're harvesting for this other ceremony, we have to respect it and treat it like a relative and welcome it in the same way.
Mm-hmm. I like it. How can we take those Indigenous perspectives into our practice with the Christmas tree and in a way that promotes that reverence piece of it, that the reverential or maybe even sense of awe?
I think that there's important lessons to take. We're not turning this into a Sundance. We're not going to, not recommending we go out and, people take their pipe and go pray with the Christmas tree. Right. I mean, if you're a pipe carrier, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But I think this is an important sort of way to reclaim as human beings of interacting with the beings around us, right? Not all of us watching this are going to go out and start attending a Sundance and maybe have the privilege of participating in some way. But this is a way to practice those same spiritual insights in something you're doing anyway. Mm-hmm. Most of us have that tree in our house, whether we've thought about it or not. And so the next time you get a tree, make an offering of some kind. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just a prayer. Right. Maybe you offer some tobacco, whatever your own way is. Get to know that tree is a relative, and ask for its help. Right. And ask that you can better connect to all the beings around us.
I like it. And what you would, that's the notion of what you're supposed to take from Sundance anyway. Sundance is the ceremony, but that what you would take lessons from the grandfather tree, lessons from Sundance, lessons from carrying that pipe, you carry those into your everyday walk in life, into Midakwe Oyasin with all our relatives. The trees are our relatives.
Amen. I mean, that's what I think the hope is that, like I said, I think the Christmas tree, it's developed without us really knowing why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine Martin Luther sat down and said, you know what, I've got to start recognizing this tree as a relative. And I know that it's sort of the center of our universe and it's a spiritual, of course not. I think that's the work the tree was doing. Yeah. And these traditions have built up over time to sort of try and bring us back to our natural settings. Mm-hmm. I think I can speak for myself, but I see it in you as well, Scott, like engaging with Lakota spirituality, Indigenous spirituality, on one level is so natural because it calls up the best of who you are. Mm-hmm. And it gives you something that, it gives me something that I felt I lacked in my own upbringing, that I had aspects of, but it was not explicit. Right. And so I think this is a way maybe we can build on something we already do to make explicit what we're yearning for anyway. Yeah, to make it more intentional. Mm-hmm. I like it. Damian, it's been great having you on the show again.
Good connections here, and we love having you here at Hochoka at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School campus, where we talk about issues central to Native American education today. Until next time, stay centered.